channel. My name is Martine, and if you are new here, I do videos on Vedic astrology mainly, but also with some tropical insights, and I focus on both relationships and natal astrology. And if you like this video and you would like to see more content from me, please like, subscribe, hit the notifications bell to see when I will post a new video, and please comment in the comment section with anything you want to say. And also, if you're interested in a personal consultation, I do consultations on a wide variety of topics. Please check out the video description. I will leave my contact information there. Thank you. So today's video is going to be on a topic that is long overdue, I guess. And it's in continuation with the Rahu Ketu in synastry topic that I have already discussed in several videos, and this is about Mars and conjunction to Rahu or Ketu in synastry, more specifically in between two people's charts. So I'm not necessarily talking here about the composite chart, although you can also apply it to some extent to the composite chart, but I'm mainly going to be talking about chart inter-aspects between two separate individuals, okay? So this is one of the worst, I'm just gonna say, this is one of the worst contacts, but I'm gonna get more in depth about it, why it is one of the worst contacts to have in synastry, in my humble opinion. If some of you have watched the video that I have made about the 12 worst placements astrologically in synastry, well, I didn't include this aspect, but if I had extended the list, this would be number 13, basically. The 13th worst aspect is definitely one of the worst ones to have in my personal opinion and based on my experiences of reading charts, and not only. Yeah, so I'm gonna get directly into the description, okay? Just to give a brief introduction once again to people who maybe are quite new to astrology. Mars stands for Mars in a person's chart stands for aggressiveness, masculinity, actually the primitive masculine energy that all of us have some of. It's about instincts, it's about survival instincts, it's about the warrior hunter archetype, it's about sexuality, and it also corresponds to the root chakra. And it also rules anger, among other things. Now, Rahu, or the north node of the moon, stands for obsessive energy, material desires, ambitions, what you are here to learn in this lifetime, lessons that you have to learn, traits that you have to develop in this lifetime, basically where you are going in this lifetime. Ketu, or the south node of the moon, which is always opposite Rahu, is the comfort zone, the areas that you have explored in previous reincarnations, and traits that you have developed thoroughly in your previous lives. So basically, things that you are supposed to be moving away from in this lifetime. Now, the theory about the Mars conjunct Rahu versus Mars conjunct Ketu is that Mars conjunct Ketu is a little bit better than the Mars conjunct Rahu. This is the theory. Why? Because, again, I'm going to link all of the related videos that I can think of in the video description, so you might also want to check those. But I have made a video where I explained in depth how to read Rahu and Ketu in synastry and also in the natal chart. And I did mention there that conjunctions to Rahu amplify over the course of a relationship. So in this case, basically, Mars conjunct Rahu would mean that the longer you are with a person, or the longer this relationship lasts, the more the Mars energy amplifies. And Mars, remember, stands for aggressiveness, competitiveness, anger, arguments, etc., fights, so on and so forth. On the other hand, everything that Ketu conjuncts is going to be a diminishment of that energy over time. So Mars conjunct Ketu would therefore mean that, you start out having anger with this person, or maybe you really push each other's buttons and you really trigger each other's hatred and anger and competitiveness and all that stuff. But as time progresses, the less anger you have. So you tend to work things out. You start out being angry towards each other and arguing a lot, but then it gets better as the relationship progresses. This is the theory. Okay, now I'm going to get into my interpretation of this aspect, which is that you cannot really say for sure how well the anger is going to dissipate over time. And the question, of course, is how much time does it take for the Mars conjunction to Ketu to actually loosen its grip over time? Like, translation, like how many, heated arguments, how many broken dishes, how many, instances of potential physical violence does it take before this energy fizzles out, like plays out, runs its course? That's the question, because I've seen it, both the conjunction to Rahu and the conjunction to Ketu tend to show aggressiveness. So the conjunction to Rahu is definitely hands down the worst, as far as I have noticed at least. Most cases, it is the worst. Okay, and let's not forget that Ketu represents past life connections. So usually when you see Mars conjunct Ketu, tends to show that you have met this person to pay off some kind of a debt. So either you have to pay the debt or they have to pay the debt. But Mars conjunct Ketu shows that in a past life you were either brothers or you were soldiers in the same regiment or military, or you were in some kind of a military relationship, or you were just fierce competitors with one another. So in past life, you have had some kind of heated arguments, maybe even a violent interaction with this person. So in this lifetime, you meet this person to technically work things out. Now, exactly, like I said, exactly what the interaction was, how long will it take before it fizzles out, nobody can say that for sure. Okay? So that's one of the reasons why this is really a difficult placement to have in relationships regardless. But with the conjunction to Rahu, it really literally plays out like the description says. Okay, this is something that I have seen time and again. Okay, with the Mars conjunct Rahu, it tends to start out as a potential attraction. It can even start out as an obsession on the part of the Rahu person especially. But the longer two people are together, the more likely they are to become angrier and to become even more savage and more fierce to one another and more impatient. And, it's kind of a spiraling out of control thing, especially on the part of the Mars person. So the Mars person is the one whose anger is going to be triggered basically the most in this partnership, but it's not strict, so both people can play both the Mars and the Ketu and the Rahu, in the interaction. But in any case, it's a really difficult placement to have in a relationship. It tends to show it's a snowball effect where the arguments just get bigger and bigger and worse and more, and there's no resolution. Basically, that's what this aspect says. But I haven't seen it. I haven't seen this aspect play out nicely anytime, in any circumstances. Maybe if you have enough positive aspects, maybe especially involving these planets, then to some extent it will be neutralized or it won't be as bad. But in most cases that I have seen, it just tends to spiral out of control. So the Mars conjunct Rahu is absolutely one of the worst to have. With the Ketu, it can go either way. But again, the question is, how much are you willing to put up with? Because you're going to see when I get to the examples, because I have 2 examples that I want to discuss that are related. again, with the Ketu, you could be meeting a former enemy or like a former competitor, you know, from a past life. And of course, as it tends to suggest, you can end up having open warfare with this person. Just because it tends to go down over time doesn't mean that you're still not going to have enough time to, you know, break each other's necks, if you know what I'm talking about. The question is, how bad is the Ketu situation? How bad is the Mars situation? Sometimes maybe you can get some hints to this depending on what other aspects there are in synastry, particularly involving these two planets or points. So you can tell how bad it can get. But generally, in my humble opinion, both the conjunction to Rahu and the conjunction to Ketu are these aspects that you really want to avoid in synastry. Like, or if you have them, you really want to keep an eye out because they can turn sour really quickly. Okay, and this is being just my interpretation on it, and I'm going to talk about the examples that I have found. Okay, so just to give you the best and most telling example, and you're going to see them on the screen. Sorry for the inconsistency, because I know in the previous video I used Indian style charts, and now I'm using the typical Western style chart. It doesn't really matter what the style of chart you use. The reason I use these is because Astro.com has this feature where you can do synastry overlay between two partners. So here you see on the inside Amber Heard, whose time of birth is unknown, but the time of birth is really irrelevant in this particular case because I'm only going to be looking at the Mars and Rahu placements. Obviously, for the overall synastry, her time of birth would be very important, but I'm just going to look at the Rahu, and basically I'm going to look at what I have, okay? And on the inside right, you have Amber Heard, and on the outside, you have Johnny Depp and his planets, okay? And you can clearly see, once again, I still use sidereal and whole sign system. And you can also see it written there on the chart. And what I noticed about them is that they have the Ketu conjunct Mars, okay? So his, let me think, right, his Ketu is conjunct her Mars in Sagittarius. You can't see Ketu on the chart with the red, so his planets are outside with the red. You cannot see Ketu, but you know that it's opposite Rahu, and it falls in Sagittarius, and in Vedic astrology, two planets in the same sign form a conjunction. So this is one of the big counterexamples that I found to prove my case that Ketu conjunct Mars is not a positive aspect, okay? Now, granted, they also have other things going on in their synastry. They also have, they also have, so in the same interaction, you have her Mars conjunct his moon. And once again, you see this inversion of the polarity where it's the woman's Mars conjunct the man's moon. I kind of expand this in depth in the Moon-Mars synastry video. But in this case, she was the one who was the aggressor, okay? And she was the one who was the aggressor, and yeah, which makes sense. Again, she's the Mars, right? She is the Mars, and she's having her Mars conjunct by his Ketu, which tends to show, so she was, definitely shows that she was the aggressor in the relationship. But what I'm trying to say is that, okay, Ketu is past lives, but you don't know what the past life was like, or like what it was about. They could have been at each other's throats for many reincarnations, and and sure, maybe if they had managed to stay together longer, eventually they would have stopped trying to kill each other. But you know, the question is how much longer would it have taken? Maybe it would have taken them another 20 years. And you know, who knows how bad it would have gotten if they hadn't separated. This is what I'm trying to say. So just because it's a past life connection doesn't mean that it doesn't show a threat for very bad arguments, even potential violence, okay? This is one example that I found. And the second, and maybe even more important, is O.J. Simpson and his alleged victim, Nicole Brown Simpson. Alleged, I mean, he was, I think, exonerated of the crime or whatever. He was not convicted, but I mean, basically her astrology, I'm gonna get into this at the end actually, before I discuss the synastry overlays. I'm also going to be talking about how her Arudha Lagna clearly shows that she died a violent death, okay? I mean, she clearly died a violent death, but that doesn't show that he is guilty. However, you know, I'm not saying that he is guilty. I'm just saying that, you know, I'm just going to describe what the chart says, so, yeah. So one of the things that, again, so his placements are on the outside with the red, and her placements are in the inner circle with the blue. Okay, and one of the things that stood out to me about his charts is that he has Mars conjunct Rahu natally in Taurus in Kritika Nakshatra, which is, it's a really aggressive energy, okay? Kritika is the warrior kind of archetype, okay? And normally it's not evil, but Kritika actually is one of those nakshatras that turns up quite often in the charts of serial killers, because it is, although it is not by nature a very evil influence, it's one of those nakshatras that makes people very aggressive, can make a person, lose their composure and their self-control and do things that are violent, or, do things out of anger. That's what I'm trying to say. So he has his Mars Rahu conjunct in Kritika, okay? So that's a really angry energy there. And on top of that, so you can see this in Taurus if you look there, in the 4th house. I think it's her 4th house, yeah. And so, and you see that it's conjunct her sun. Now, again, this is interesting because in both of these cases, you have a polarity switch. What I mean by polarity switch is, I mean that it's the man's feminine planets aspecting the woman's masculine planets. Okay, in the Johnny Depp Amber Heard, you have her Mars and his moon, which I explained in depth psychologically when I talked about, in the video that I made about Moon-Mars aspects in synastry. And here you have, again, you have her Sun conjunct his Mars, okay? So this is, normally, this is not a very bad, a violent aspect. It's not necessarily a synastry aspect that points towards violence. It tends to point to a lot of heated interaction. So a lot of passions, a lot of definitely a strong physical attraction, but in itself it does not stand for violence. However, the Rahu conjunct her Sun, I talked about this, actually made a separate video about Rahu conjunct Sun, Ketu conjunct Sun. So when a man's Rahu is conjunct a woman's Sun, and the longer they are together, the bigger her ego will get, okay? So she will be perceived to be increasingly more masculine in the relationship. Again, it's not necessarily true that she will become more masculine, but this is how she will be perceived by the man. So basically, according to traditional texts, it's one of those aspects that sages warn about when it's the man's Rahu and the woman's Sun, because it tends to make the woman over time become bossier, more center stagey, more proud, more ego-driven. So my intuition is that this is something that contributed to this unfortunate event, let's say. And let's be real, even if he didn't kill her, which, let's say he didn't kill her, there was still evidence that he was extremely abusive towards her. So he was definitely physically abusive, okay? And so this is one of the things that, and on top of that, he also happens to have Rahu conjunct Mars, which of course, engages his, masculinity and anger and whole testosterone thing going on. So my feeling is this one and a few other aspects are making him feel threatened in this relationship, making him feel a little bit maybe emasculated in the relationship. The second one that really stands out to me is her Venus-Mars conjunction, right? It's her Venus-Mars conjunction conjunct his sun. So they have a double whammy here. So there's a lot of heated interactions here, okay? It's like, you know, there's a lot of heated interactions. There's a lot of passion. And another thing is that not only, right, so it's not only his sun, it's also his Venus, because if you see, Venus is here as well in the sign of Gemini. And this is another polarity switch. So she has her Mars conjunct his Venus. So in a way, I don't know, my feeling is, now there are two possible psychological explanations for this. With a polarity switch like this, what could be the case is that maybe he was the one who was the more infatuated in the relationship. Maybe he was the one who was made to feel like he was a little bit subservient to her, or he felt like she was the queen in the relationship, and he almost kind of had to tone down. And he felt basically, like I tried to say in the beginning, that his masculinity was threatened by this relationship. And then on top of that, of course, she ended up having affairs. Well, of course, the question is, did she have affairs after he started being physically abusive? Chances are probably yes. So, basically, yeah. But there was a lot of heated interactions, a lot of irrational things going on in this relationship, okay? That's what I'm trying to say. And then on top of that, she has her Ketu conjunct his moon, which shows that the longer they are together, the more emotionally detached he becomes. So, yeah, so she has Rahu conjunct moon natally, which makes her a really emotional person, but also a very materialistic person. And then she has her Ketu conjunct his moon. You can see his moon with the red there in Pisces. So, yeah, overall, it tends to paint the picture of how the relationship went down. Just from a few simple aspects, you can already get the feeling of what was happening there. And then to get to her Arudha Lagna, so she's the one who has the chart on the inside with the ascendant. Her ascendant is in Aquarius, which means that she has two Arudha Lagnas, one of them based on Saturn, the other one based on Aquarius's second ruler, Rahu. So based on, she has one Arudha Lagna. Here you have another beautiful symmetry, like in the video that I made previously where I talked about Paul Newman's chart. Here you have a very nice symmetry with her Arudha Lagna situation, because despite the fact that she has two Arudha Lagnas, both of them tell a similar story, except one of them gives a little bit more information than another. So I looked at her circumstances of death. That's what I'm trying to talk about here. So she has one Arudha Lagna in Aries, the other one in Libra. They're opposite. There is a mirroring of the energies here. For the Aries Arudha Lagna, you can see it there on her third house. Aries falls on her third house, right? So for the circumstances of death, you have to look at the Arudha Lagna Lord, the third house, and the third house Lord. The third house from the Arudha Lagna tends to show circumstances of death. And she has third house from Arudha Lagna occupied by Venus and Mars. So circumstances of death are occupied by the ruler of her first house of the Arudha, which is the actual physical body, and the seventh house, which is the spouse. So circumstances of death, now this could be also interpreted as the spouse was, or the partner was with her when she died, which is true because she was killed together with her boyfriend at the time. But it could also literally mean that the partner had something to do with her death, okay? And aside from that, Mars, and not just that actually, so she has Venus conjunct Mars in the third from the Arudha, and they're both opposite Saturn. Both of these are two massive malefic influences on the circumstances of death. When you have this strong malefic influence on circumstances of death, malefic planets actually sitting there, it very likely shows a wrongful death. So it shows a violent death, especially with Mars sitting there. Whenever you see Mars involved with the circumstances of death, you would expect to see things like stabbings, like car accidents, like anything involving some kind of a mechanical damage to the body, but especially things piercing the body. So things like stabbings or whatever, having limbs chopped off or whatever. And she and her partner at the time were stabbed to death. So the circumstances of death are definitely shown there. And this is from one Arudha Lagna. This is from Aries. Now, if you look to the opposite side and you take her second Arudha Lagna, which is Libra, and you look at the third house from the Arudha Lagna, once again, the third house, is opposite the Venus-Mars conjunction. So once again, the same Venus-Mars conjunction is aspecting the third house from the Arudha Lagna, which is the house of circumstances of death. And once again, Mars rules the seventh from the Arudha, namely Aries in this case, which shows the spouse, and Venus rules the Arudha Lagna itself, namely Libra in this case, which is the physical body. Okay, so once again you have the same malefics influencing the circumstances of death, but on top of that you also have the ruler of Sagittarius, which is the third from the Arudha Lagna. Right, where is it? Jupiter in Scorpio. Okay, now, this is not a particularly horrible thing, except Jupiter opposite Sun, once again tends to show a violent death, because Sun in the Arudha Lagna tends to point towards a violent death, towards a negative death. It's seen as a malefic in the Arudha Lagna. But not only that, but it hit me just now that the ruler of the third house from her Arudha is also opposite O.J. Simpson's Rahu-Mars conjunction. So, I mean, again, I'm not saying he did it, but I mean, just looking at this chart, it's like there's so many coincidences piling up. It's just baffling, okay? Of course, what do I know? Maybe one or both of their time of births are off, so who knows? Okay, but this is pretty much what I have seen. Now, again, granted, Nicole Simpson and O.J. Simpson, they didn't have the Rahu conjunct Mars or Ketu conjunct Mars. However, you still have the same energies in play, because he had the Rahu conjunct Mars natally that was activated by her chart. Okay, so Rahu conjunct Mars basically shows that in this lifetime you will absolutely have to deal with increasing anger, and on top of anger you also have a lot of ambition, but it definitely shows a lot of anger, a lot of masculine energy, a lot of developing the ego and aggressiveness and competitiveness and all this stuff. So yeah, and her chart kind of activated all that. So this has been pretty much it. And once again, I hope you have enjoyed it. Please let me know what your thoughts are, and if you want to see similar videos, or if you have any ideas of videos that you want to see in the future, please comment in the comment section. And please watch the ads once again if you want to support my channel for free. And yes, that has been it. And if you liked it, thumbs up. And hit the notifications bell to see when I will post a new video. And also, if you're interested in a personal consultation, I do consultations on a wide variety of topics. Please check out the video description. I will leave my contact information there. Thank you.